Okay. Why do I enjoy games? Do I go? Okay.
It's on you, man. It's on you.
Alright. Hi, I'm Ed, and I'm a social gamer. I mainly like to play games for the story, I suppose, the character development. I really like games with sequels, and when those sequels are done well. Hi, I'm Ed. I'm a social gamer, and I mainly play games for the storyline. I particularly like games that have sequels, and when those sequels are particularly done well, those are often my favourite. They don't necessarily have to be cohesive storyline, but for example, games like Spider-Man and the Morrowind games.
All right, just before we start, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask you the same question once you've finished playing, and then I want to see whether your answer will be the same. All right? So, do you think the genre of game reflects the design of the environment?
What was the question? To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, games like first-person shooters, they're always going to be limited to real-world environments, real-world locations, whereas fantasy games and sci-fi games, they can play around with the type of environments that they want to be in to suit the story.
All right, next question.
Are you doing 1B?
Question.
Well, I'm going to ask it before you have to answer it, so you'll know what question I'm asking. All right.
On you.
Is it going?
A minimum, I'd say, of every other day.
Is your preferred genre?
Without a doubt, I always tend to go for games based in the fantasy and sci-fi genre.
And finally, before we start playing, do you prefer open world games or level based and puzzle games?
Tough question. Like both. I like puzzle games, but if it were a choice between the two, I would go more for an open world game. I just believe that there's more time to be spent in an open world game, and you have more choice as to what you want to do, and I think choice is an important part of a good looking game.
This is Lord of the Rings Online. It's an online game. And what do you think about the way that the environment is designed and the graphics, considering it's running off an internet connection? I would say it's on par with such games that run off a console. What are your opinions?
I'd say that the graphics in this game are really very good. I mean, you can only perform so well as an online game and sacrifice the connection speed, but this delivers really quite well. I mean, you can see a lot of the complicated environment around here, particularly the buildings, are really well done, and they're very true to the storyline.
Now, this is running off low graphics. Do you think that it truly reflects the sort of universe of Lord of the Rings?
I would say yes. I mean, even on low graphics, they've clearly been working off of the film and the representations through there, because that's what most people recognise as being Lord of the Rings.
Could you show us what the high graphics looks like, please? Right, so you can clearly see there is a massive difference in the texture maps, the surrounding environment. What's your opinion?
While the graphics are significantly increased, and you can see that in the representation of the character, it also it really slows down the actual gameplay, and I would say that sacrificing the connection speed and the fluidity of the game is just not worth it for the higher graphics, because it interrupts the gameplay just too much.
This is the map of Lord of the Rings. As you can see, it's huge. It is an open world game. It truly reflects the Lord of the Rings. What?
I could zoom out if you want.
Really? It doesn't go any further. That's area door. Whoa, it's huge. Okay, so basically, right. So this is the map of Middle Earth. As you can see, it looks exactly how it does in how Tolkien drew it in the beginning of his novels. What's your opinion on an open world game, Ed?
I really like it. I mean, as you can see, there's a huge expanse to be able to go through, and it just leaves so much open for more storyline and fill out more gameplay. And the more the better, really.
Do you know where or what your objective is and what helps you navigate within the environment?
Yeah, quite clearly actually. Within the environment, you have a little mini-map up on the top right-hand corner, and you can select which quests you want to show up on that mini-map through the menu, and through clicking on the left-hand side of each quest title, you can turn on, right there, the little ring that shows up on your minimap, and that will tell you exactly where to go. And if you get lost, it shows up in the main map once it loads. It shows up. It doesn't show up. It shows up within the region exactly where, with the flashing red ring, because that's the colour that I've got chosen with the quest, exactly where I need to go, and it shows right there and there.
Is there anything that is distracting to you? So foliage, colours, buildings?
The main issue I have...
Go to Bree. Okay, you can cut that stuff. Is there anything that is distracting to you? So foliage, buildings, colours, music, anything?
I don't find the music too distracting. The foliage, there is a lot of colour on the screen, and it distracts in the way that you can't take everything in at once. But the main issue I have is with the heads-up display. As you can see, there is a lot going on, from the health bar on the top left to the chat box on the bottom left, and then you've got a skill set menu, and that runs to a sub menu where you can access everything else. And then you've got quest markers and the mini map, and all of that, when put back into the recommended view, takes up a lot of the screen, and that can be very distracting. Within Bree, there's a lot of buildings. It's all very close together, and as I mentioned before, there's almost too much going on. You'll never be able to take everything in, particularly when you're so focused on just getting a quest done. You miss out on the little details, and so I think that could just be reduced. What's the question first?
There is no question. Just talk about the environment. Talk about it. Talk about the maneuverability. What do you think about the believability in the environment?
Well, Bree is an excellent example of the believability of the environment, because while everything serves a purpose, the purpose of what they serve is not necessarily immediately evident. Take, for example, this little street seller. He increases the believability that this is a fully functioning town, and when taken through the area known as Scholar's Stair, you can see there are loads of these merchants, and that makes it really look like it's a proper town. You've got people just going about their daily business.
So you would say that the enhancements of the environment contribute to the believability of the game?
Yeah, the devil's in the details.
Finally, referring back to the first question I asked you, would you change your answer or not, and why?
I would still stick with my original answer. Tolkien's Lotro is a very vast universe with a lot of internal history, and I think that's represented very well within the game. They've clearly looked at the source material and tried to keep as close to it within the storyline and both environment design as much as they can. Yeah, they haven't really gone wildly off topic. They have definitely been able to play around with the source material to suit their own purposes of storyline and expand it where they see fit, but they haven't done so much so that it really alienates it from the original material.
Just quickly, with online games and console games, what do you think is the difference in the believability? Do you find it more believable in an online game, or do you find that console games are more believable?
I find console games, they exist within their own universe. They have a set path, no matter how much they try to expand it in other titles. It's always going to be limited by how much each game can hold, whereas an online game is potentially infinite. And
so you feel like it continues even when you're not there?
Yeah, it can continue no matter what, and there's always going to be... The whole point of it is to keep an open storyline with online games, I find, and they never really bring anything to a close without already having the expansion lined up.
Do you think the genre of the game, such as Assassin's Creed, reflects the design of the environment?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about Assassin's Creed with each new game that comes out is that it's set within a different environment, and that kind of dictates the storyline. I mean, if you look at the previous Assassin's Creed titles, they were all set in the Middle East and within Italy. And this new American title, since it's set in colonial America, it has to be lots of open environment with developing areas.
Do you think that affects the gameplay? So having open areas instead of being, enclosed towns, lots of people around?
I would think so. The whole thing about Assassin's Creed, again, is the free movement, and that becomes a lot more difficult, and they've had to develop the game as such with regard to the free running, because you're in such an open area, you can't do the constant movement. It may be a very long time before you're able to properly run.
Right, so obviously this map is really different from the map we just saw in Lord of the Rings Online. Can you sort of expand on your opinions?
Yeah, I mean, the main difference between this map and the Lord of the Rings map is that within the online game, a full map was already given to you, whereas with this, you start out with nothing, and you have to travel through the environment and find your own routes as to so you never really have a fully uncovered map because just some parts are completely inaccessible. These large blank areas in the map usually signify either open water or a mountain that you just can't climb. So it leaves a clearly defined dark blue line through the route that you've taken. It makes it more believable because it runs off memory.
Can you navigate easily within this environment?
Yes, I mean the mini-map within Assassin's Creed is very similar to the Lord of the Rings map in that they have the quest marker right in front of you, and as long as you point yourself in the right direction, then it's very easy to get to. The whole trick of it is just trying to work out a route from where you are to where you need to be.
How do you think what are, would you say, the enhancements of the environment that contribute to the believability of the game?
This environment, it's very dense and complex. You've got the very realistic looking buildings, but it's also the people that are just going around their general day of work, like this guy here, and off in the distance we have just some workers. It's all within a very realistic environment. I mean, you're not going to be finding a greengrocer around the harbour. You're going to find people that are doing their menial labour. And as I said, it's all very complex. You get the feeling that you are just one person within a much larger society. Everybody is doing their own thing, and they pay very little attention to you, really. You're just one cog in a much larger machine.
So finally, referring back to the first question I asked you, would you change your answer or not, and why?
I'm still set on my original answer, I'd say. The game genre dictates so much of the environment design that it would be difficult to imagine established characters in entirely different settings or genres of game without certain environmental aspects.
Because next it's going to be character interaction. So I'm looking at how the character... For this artifact, I'm moving on from layout design and looking at how character interaction with game environments has progressed over time. This all will add up to how the enhancement of the environment contributes to the game believability. Game character movements have become more and more believable thanks to better bone structures, IKs, and the improvements to the ragdoll effect. Of character, are you more partial towards?
I was wondering who it was.
Did I ring you?
Yeah.
When? Have I been sitting on it the whole time?
Oh no, that was a different phone call. What's that? Just press the red button and we'll check.
Well, very basically, I've just got myself into a combat situation with a variety of different troops. As we can see here, what I'm doing right now is dealing with all of the grunts, while the heavy troop and the officer on horseback in distance who's just been dismounted, they're a lot more difficult to deal with because they're just generally stronger. Well, the grunt is physically stronger and the officer is better trained. What else we can see is it's not just me fighting. Some random, I suppose you'd call them bandits, joined in. They've recently been taken care of. Close to dying, so I'm going to run away. Do you want to ask me a question? Or what do you want me to talk about in particular?
How much do you perceive the environment to affect the character?
I'd say it affects it a very large amount. The main concept of Assassin's Creed is how you can free run through a multitude of different levels. You can run through the street and there's still free running to do, or you can go to the rooftops and do it that way. The only problem is that the free running, while in general it's good, there seems to be gaps in routes that you can run, and that ends and really breaks up the fluidity of the environment. Like just there was nowhere else I could have really gone, or nowhere that I could have reacted to quick enough to make a difference to me falling from the roof.
What would you say are the factors that have increased the believability of character interaction with the environment?
With the environment, I would again refer back to the little details, the stuff that you don't necessarily interact with, but you can have like interaction with civilians. Generally, they're useless, but they do further to the believability. But there are little things that you can do with them, tactically speaking, like incite a riot, and that can mask something that you need to do, and how the guards are sporadically placed all over the environment. It just makes it more realistic. Like right now, it's quite obvious they're searching for me, so they're out in force. But in a peacetime, they're just guards.
How easy do you find it to interact with the environment?
Games like Assassin's Creed rely on the environment as a plot device. The environment is massive and complex, and it breaks up the fluidity in character movement. It would be better with less complicated but equally dense environments.
What type of characters do you prefer in Lord of the Rings Online?
Within online games, and Lord of the Rings Online not excluded, there do tend to be gender differences in relation to the traits and perks that you get. And it also, after that choice within character creation, comes which class you want to play as, and that'll deeply dictate what type of abilities that you want to specialise in. For instance, this guy is a hunter, but you can choose to be a guardian, which is more defensive. Champions who are more offensive, and wardens like the middle ground between the two. And then you have like a whole range of magic and burglar, which is more stealth based. But personally, I prefer to go for male characters, as I feel female characters are underrepresented within games. Games like Lara Croft and Bioshock Infinite, they're slowly working towards a more positive image of female characters within games. But again, within Bioshock Infinite, the main female character is still just a secondary character.
How would you feel the environment affects the way that the character interacts with it?
Within Lord of the Rings and generally most online games, there's a lot of internal character development, and by that I mean there's no real interaction with the environment. It gives the illusion of an open world, but there's only so much you can do, like your jumping ability. Unlike as seen with Assassin's Creed, you can't jump on buildings at all. And interaction with the general public, it's limited and often self-serving. And by that I mean you only really go to merchants because they have something you want, or if you want to travel somewhere, or if you want to buy something. That's the only time you'd ever really interact with the rest of the environment.
So the movements are really different from Assassin's Creed.
Definitely,
You'd
yeah.
say.
It's a lot more static, but again more tactical. You have to choose which are the right abilities to use at whatever time. You can't just wave your knife at something and hope it's dead.
But it's always the same character movements.
Yeah,
So
it's the same repeated pattern. And this is one of the very few instances in which you interact with the environment. It's gaining control of a gate, and that gives you like a safe area to work within, and you have to do those progressively throughout until the skirmish is over.
what else can we talk about?
Do you want me to teleport out of this and go somewhere else?
Yeah. Talk about
With Lord of the Rings Online, it is in some respects a linear game, in that you're restricted by the environment as to what you can actually access. But saying that, what makes it an open world game is that you can travel wherever you want to go at whatever time. Like for instance, with example of two games like Assassin's Creed and the new Tomb Raider, while they do claim to be open world, it's you can't easily access different areas, and the whole point of within games like that in accessing different areas is only to further the current mission, whereas with this you can just go back for a more self-serving purpose. Like right now I've teleported all the way over to pretty much the other side of the world, and for no real reason than to just explore. So to sum it up, it's a linear game, but it has a non-linear game flow.